What's up, guys? My name is Colin. I'm editor of IGN PlayStation. I'm here with Scott Lowe. He's the executive editor of IGN Tech. And you might think we're here to talk about PlayStation because I'm on the video. But Scott, we're not here to talk about PlayStation.
Not
we're here
at
to
all.
talk about Sega. Isn't that weird? Scott, something interesting happened today. A forum called Assembler Gamers released, a user there, what's his name? I have it written down. Super Magnetic, his name is. Apparently, maybe a former Sega employee released images of a prototype console called the SEGA Pluto. What is it?
So basically, it's a modified version of the Sega Saturn. It was apparently like a prototype version that was in development, but kind of looked completely different. Ran the same discs, at least in some capacity, but most importantly, had a NetSuite connection, so it could actually connect to the internet, which was, obviously a big limiting factor to the Saturn, and one of the biggest features of the Dreamcast after that. Yeah,
I mean, when the story kind of broke when we were talking about it today in the office, I kind of described it as the missing link between Saturn and Dreamcast. Obviously, Saturn could connect to the internet with NetLink, which was a thing you had to buy for $200. It only had connectivity with certain games, and it was really clumsy and obviously very expensive. And Sega Saturn itself was a failure. It sold under 10 million units worldwide. It was, of course, announced at E3 and then released right then. Bad decision. It's kind of a joke that you kind of have to give more lead time now.
More momentum.
Yeah. Build some momentum. So this thing's kind of cool. Obviously, pictures are cascading across your screen right now. But it's interesting, I guess, given the time, the mid-90s, the Saturn was out. This might have been released maybe 97, 98 if they did anything with it. It's kind of interesting that the internet was kind of coming to fruition with console gaming at that time.
Yeah. I mean, and before that, it was the Pippin, which obviously was a total blunder. It was Apple's one and only kind of foray into the console space. But yeah, I mean, it's a huge, it's kind of an interesting progression to look at to see how the space evolved and where Sega kind of stumbled a little bit. It was, if you look at the hardware, it's not very inspiring. But of course, it's just an internal prototype. But yeah, it's interesting. Apparently it was at least the one that's being posted online. It can play Saturn games, so it's probably running a similar set of hardware. But obviously, one of the caveats there is that it is region locked, apparently, according to the poster. So, very interesting stuff.
Yeah, it is. Sega was always kind of ahead of the game, and it's always interesting to see in our field a piece of technology that was kind of rebuffed at the time ends up becoming important later. I think we see that with N-Gage and then the rise of the smartphone in terms of playing games on that. And we see that, of course, with things like X-Band on Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis evolving into NetLink on Saturn, and then the Dreamcast is really the first mainstream console to be released internet-ready. And it wasn't until really this generation that every console was launched with that kind of technology on board. So it's kind of cool in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I encounter a lot on the tech side. I mean, there's a lot of products out there that were years ahead of their time, but they just lacked that kind of final push to really make it cohesive and interesting and compelling to the user. So this is certainly an example of that, in much of Sega stuff. But it's like I said, it's a very interesting way to look at the kind of the progression of thought, from inside the company where we otherwise don't see that kind of stuff.
Indeed. Well, our gratitude to Assembler Gamers and Super Magnetic. We're very thankful for them to post these images, and this is an interesting story, especially for those of us interested in the history of the industry. So Scott, thank you for joining me.
Of course.
This hasn't been a PlayStation conversation, but a Sega conversation, which you'll probably never see another one of on IGN. In the meantime, for all things video games, keep it tuned to IGN.